Over the past 2 years, you've probably been inundated with more conversations about coronavirus and vaccines than you know what to do with. You've probably met more than one person who is wary of taking the COVID vaccine, or maybe at some point you've even questioned the science behind it yourself. So, what exactly is an mRNA vaccine? Is the immunity you get from a vaccine just as good as the immunity you get from being sick? By learning the science behind these questions, not only will you be more well-informed for your next family dinner, but you'll also gain a better understanding of what happens underneath your skin every time you get a shot. Before anything else, it's important to know what a virus is. A virus is really just a hunk of genetic material and a few proteins, arguably not even a living thing. They can't replicate on their own and instead must hijack host cells to do so. Viruses have a very small and simple structure. The most important part of any virus is its genetic material, or genome, which contains the instructions needed to produce more viruses. A virus's genome can be either DNA or RNA. Coronavirus genomes are made up of a single strand of mRNA. This single strand of mRNA is surrounded by a protective envelope. Embedded in this protective envelope are proteins. In the case of coronavirus, the most famous of these proteins is the spike protein. This spike protein is what the virus uses for latching on to host cells. Okay, so now that we've gone over a coronavirus's structure, we'll go over what happens when the virus actually reaches your cells. Coronavirus usually enters your body through your upper airway when you breathe in droplets containing the virus, say from someone who coughed or sneezed nearby. The inside of your upper airway is lined with billions of epithelial cells, which are the border cells that lie between your body and the outside world. When the spike protein of the virus reaches the right kind of receptor on one of these epithelial cells, the virus latches on and injects its mRNA genome inside. This mRNA is in a language your cell already understands. That's because mRNA is the disposable blueprint your cells use every day to create billions of your own proteins. Your cells usually can't tell the difference between its own mRNA blueprints and the virus's mRNA, so it begins to read the virus's mRNA and turn it into proteins too. 2/3 of the viral mRNA are translated into proteins that help the mRNA replicate and create even more mRNA copies of the viral genome. These new copies can't just leave the cell on their own, naked without a protective envelope and important structural proteins. First, they must head to a region of the cell called the ER. This is where the cell translates the last third of the coronavirus's mRNA into the structural proteins of the virus. These include spike proteins and also other structural proteins like the membrane and envelope proteins. These proteins then move to a nearby pancake-like structure called the Golgi complex, a kind of post office that sorts and processes proteins. Coronaviruses actually hijack the trash disposal system of the Golgi complex so that they can be spit out of the cell. The viral proteins interact and move through the Golgi complex, and the new viral mRNA genomes take a piece of the Golgi membrane as they form. The Golgi complex neatly packages the new viruses up and sends them out of the cell. These new viruses can go on to infect other cells, and the whole cycle repeats itself. The number of infected cells grows exponentially. This is where your immune system comes in. Your immune system is composed of an army with billions of cells, each with their own specific jobs. The immune system protects your body using two main approaches: your innate and adaptive immune systems. The innate immune system acts first and are your emergency first responders. They remove anything they recognize as harmful. While your innate immune system doesn't require training, its less focused attacks can cause a lot of damage to nearby healthy cells. Your adaptive immune cells are trained over time to recognize a specific threat. Your adaptive immune system is very specific, but needs time to set up an effective response. Macrophages, members of your innate immune system, are the very first cells to respond to a viral infection. Macrophages will eat up bits of dead cells and viruses. Alerted to a problem, they release alarm chemical messengers called cytokines. This brings other innate immune cells to the scene. Together, your innate immune cells try to destroy infected cells. However, this also leads to inflammation. If not properly regulated, inflammation can become uncontrolled. damaging your lung tissue and even leading to scarring. Even worse, your innate immune system delivers unfocused attacks that can kill lots of healthy cells too. As the epithelial cells lining your lungs are killed, your body is left open to attack by normally unproblematic bacteria, which can lead to pneumonia. However, while your innate immune system is dealing damage to viruses and your own healthy cells alike, macrophages and dendritic cells are attempting to train your adaptive immune system. They show bits of the virus to T and B cells. There are millions of T and B cells inside your body with unique proteins called receptors on their surface. If one of these cells has a receptor that fits the bit of the virus, this cell gets selected and activated. Once those best fit T and B cells have been identified, they multiply to make clone armies of themselves, all trained to fight this specific threat. Some of the trained T cells identify and kill cells that are infected with the virus, while other kinds of T cells act like the directors of the battlefield that communicate with other immune cells. B cells are unique in that they can make specialized antibodies. These protein tags will stick to the virus. Neutralizing antibodies prevent the virus from infecting more cells. They also can mark the viruses for destruction by immune cells. Together, the specialized T and B cells of your adaptive immune system are extremely efficient at dealing with infections. If the innate and adaptive immune cells successfully deal with the virus, they will release new chemical signals that decrease inflammation and encourage healing. This is extremely important as, like previously mentioned, inflammation in the lungs is very bad. Once you've recovered from an infection, keeping your specially selected B and T cell pools in the body is what helps us remember how to fight off a specific infection if we see it again. After selection, some of the active B cells turn into memory B cells, which circulate throughout the body. They live much longer than untrained or active B cells. They don't keep making antibodies all the time, but if the same virus returns, they can be quickly reactivated to produce more antibodies and make more clones of themselves. Similarly, different kinds of memory T cells are also preserved in the body after an infection. Vaccines can also train the immune system and create immune memory, but without actually causing the illness. This means that the immune system knows what to do without having had the risk of a person getting ill in the first place. It provides safe training for our immune system to select for the proper T and B cells before being faced with the real virus. This can stop us from becoming ill if we ever encounter the real virus, and ideally from infecting other people too. Historically, vaccines have worked a number of ways, by utilizing small pieces of the virus or weakened versions of the whole virus. So what's the big deal about mRNA vaccines, and why are they any different? The COVID-19 mRNA vaccine is actually a pretty straightforward concept. Instead of containing a massive strand of mRNA that codes for lots of proteins, the mRNA vaccine contains the disposable blueprint for only one protein, coronavirus's spike protein. The mRNA for the spike protein is wrapped in a layer of fat particles that protects it and helps it get into the cell. So when the vaccine is injected into the deltoid muscle of the shoulder, the tiny, slippery particles of the vaccine enter your muscle cells easily. Once inside the cells, the vaccine's mRNA is not replicated like the coronavirus mRNA. However, it does follow a similar path to that of the virus inside the cell. The mRNA is translated into spike proteins in the ER. After that, they move to the Golgi complex, the post office of the cell that modifies the proteins and packages them for exocytosis, or for leaving the cell. Once the spike proteins are ejected from the cell, they can then be taken up by macrophages and dendritic cells. The macrophages and dendritic cells show pieces of the spike proteins to T and B cells. In this way, the selection and training process of the T and B cells can happen without even getting sick. If you were to actually get the virus, the right specialized T and B cells would already be waiting, ready to speedily take down invading coronaviruses. One big challenge with vaccines is producing a big enough immune response to create enough antibodies and enough memory T and B cells. Luckily, mRNA vaccines are pretty good at this in comparison to other vaccines. However, they do require at least 2 doses to provide truly effective immune memory. The CDC also currently recommends that people 12 and older get 1 booster shot. It still remains unclear how long immunity from getting sick with COVID or getting the vaccine lasts. It's a question many immunologists are currently working on, but preliminary results suggest the answer could be around 8 months to a year. This depends on the severity of the infection and varies from person to person. However, new mutants of the virus, like Omicron, can pop up which can escape your memory immune cells and antibodies. The good news is researchers found that people's memory T cells still respond effectively to the Omicron variant, even 6 months after their last vaccine dose. So while your immune system might not prevent an infection from the Omicron variant, it will likely protect you from becoming extremely sick.